Hi everyone, it's Ardith. Thanks for stopping by. Today I want to talk about solid stamps. There's lots of outline stamps and there's lots of ways to color them or not color them, but what about the solid stamps? In today's video I'm going to show you a number of ways that you can use your solid stamps. So let's dive right in.
Okay, so first of all, of course, you can just stamp them. I created a 1-inch grid on a square piece of white cardstock with a pencil to help me with positioning, and I'm going to use my Mini Misty along with this quarter circle shape from Catherine Pooler's Hello Sunshine set. Because my panel is square, I can turn it in my Misty and create a repeating pattern around that center point. I'm careful not to stamp on any of the pencil lines because those lines would be trapped and I wouldn't be able to erase them later, but I just work my way through, making sure there's a quarter circle shape in one corner of each square on my grid. These are all Catherine Pooler inks, and these inks are great for solid stamps, especially when they're fully inked. But the beauty of the Misty is that if you're lazy like me and you let your ink pads dry out a little, then you can restamp it right in the exact same spot to get better coverage. It's no accident that the center of my design is yellow and the 4 shapes form a kind of circle. That's my sun. I erased the pencil lines and then I quickly stamped some rays from the same set on the top and bottom of my sun, and then I added the hello sentiment stamped in black. Okay, so that's a very simply stamped card. It's a great design for beginner stampers. Moving on, this is a variation of the previous card. Again, I'm stamping a simple shape repeatedly in my Misty, and I'm turning my square panel to get precise placement. This one's from My Favorite Things. I've written down my 8-color rainbow so I remember when to use what color. Because I'm turning the cardstock, I have to stamp 1, 3, 5, 7, and then move the stamp and stamp 2, 4, 6, and 8, if you know what I mean. But because of the shape, I'm actually blending the colors where they're overlapping. These inks are translucent and they create some amazing shades when they're layered like this. My favorites here are the deep blue that comes from layering Flirty Fuchsia and Fiesta blue, and the magenta from Party Dress and Flirty Fuchsia. In fact, these results have fascinated me so much that I made a bunch of color mixing charts using Catherine's inks, much like watercolor mixing charts, but that's a topic for another video. I added a simple thank you and I colored in the O with a black marker to hide the fact that the points were not completely perfect in the center, and that one's done too. Now I'm moving to a different technique, and that's faux watercolor with an ink pad. I've got these big, beautiful, solid layers of flowers from Altenew's fabulous Florets, and a piece of cardstock that's 8 inches across by 5 1/4 inches tall. I'm going to use a technique that Jennifer McGuire invented recently, where you stamp down the center of a large piece of cardstock and then chop it in half and get 2 cards. I placed it in the right corner of my Misty since it made it easier to tell where the center or 4-inch mark is, because that's where I need to do my stamping. I moved the cardstock up a bit so I could stamp off the bottom edge, and I pulled out the solid layer of flowers and immediately forgot what I was showing you and stamped it down without spritzing. Let's try that again. And I almost forgot again. But all you need to do is spritz the inked up stamp, and since these inks are water-based, they'll bead up, and when you stamp them down, you get a softer watercolored look. I moved to Party Dress and the smaller flower, and then finally Tiki Torch off the top. I went back in and added some leaves, being sure to build out my arrangement on both sides of that center line. Finally, I went in with some dark gray ink for the flower centers. This time I had it on an acrylic block and I spritzed it off camera and just stamped it down. Now I kept it simple here with just one layer, but you could do the same faux watercolor with other layers to these stamps and really build up some variation in depth. And just for a comparison, here's my faux watercolor panel and the stamped panel. You can see that the water really softens the look with slightly less crisp edges. I took it away to my trimmer and boom, 2 card fronts. Now this technique works with ink pads, but it also works with watercolor markers, anything that's water reactive. I stamped a simple thank you sentiment again with black ink, and there's my 2-for-1 faux watercolor cards. Next, let's do some kissing. With stamps, of course. This is a fun way to get a different look from a solid stamp, like this heart from Ellen Hutson's High Five set. I positioned it on my Misty, and then I grabbed this little dotty stamp from Bokeh Dot Backgrounds. I inked up the heart with Party Dress ink, and then I used an acrylic block to press the dot stamp into the inked surface. When I closed the Misty door, the pink solid heart now has dots on it. It's cool, right? Let's see that again. First, clean both the stamps. Position the heart stamp, ink it up with Tiki torch, press down on it with the dot stamp, close the Misty door, and there's another dotted heart. I continued along the rainbow, creating a bouncy row of dotty hearts. I trimmed down the panel and I added a sentiment from the same set to finish this one off. And now it's time for rock and roll, baby. This is a great technique that gives a two-color look to your stamping. I've got Limoncello and Tiki torch here, along with a Waffle flower sunshine. I inked it up with Limoncello all over, and then I kind of rock and rolled just the edges into the Tiki torch ink. This can give a harsh line on the stamp, so I went back into the lighter ink. And you do want to be careful about contaminating your lighter color ink pads with darker inks, and you can blend the line with your finger or a dauber or brush if you prefer. You can also get this look with your Misty by stamping it twice, once with the lighter ink all over, and once with the darker ink just on the one edge to get a similar look. But since there's no rockin' and rollin', you probably have to call it something less fun. So here I did it again with the cloud. I used a lighter gray and a darker gray just along the bottom and left edge. That gave me a more subtle effect than I had hoped for, but that's okay. Finally, I used Fiesta blue and something borrowed for the raindrops. I had masked down the center so that I would have rain and shine on my card. I added a little black border for some definition, and I stamped the sentiment above and below. Next, we're back to a variation of just solid stamping, but this time I'm going to stamp my solid image onto a rainbow background built from strips created with the Hutson rainbow slider die. I die cut them, quickly colored them direct to paper with the ink pads, and now I'm separating them and adhering them to a backer piece. You could do this method with some pattern paper rather than building your own background, but this is trendy and I just wanted to give it a try. And look at that! This is my favorite rainbow of Catherine's inks. It's so happy. Anyway, now I have this solid flower from Altenew's Folksy Floral set, and I'm stamping it onto the background with Wow embossing ink. Because not only can you use this ink to, emboss things, but it's also a watermark ink as well, and it will give a tone-on-tone look if you stamp it enough times, like 5. Now I did finish this card with the embossing ink, but I tried another time later with Gina K Amalgam ink in Whisper, which is a very pale gray, and I was happier with the result. I only had to stamp it once, and the result was more visible, and it didn't discolor any of the colored strips on the background. So take a look around at what you have and see what works best for you. I finished this with a tiny sentiment from the same set, since there's quite a bit going on this card visually. My final card is no line coloring. I know that normally we think of doing no line coloring with outline stamps, but you can do it with solid stamps as well. This is the Neat and Tangled Flower Medallion set. You start with a flower center and then build out from there. I'm using that Whisper ink here, and you may not even be able to see it. The idea is that it's very light, so it won't be visible through whatever coloring medium you put over top. I'm using my Copics, and I'll just show you a bit. I started with my lightest color and went over the whole shape so it's easier to see. Then I added 2 or 3 darker shades to create depth and dimension. I went back over with the lightest shade to blend it out a bit, but I really want quite a bit of contrast here to really make each shape interesting. This is quite a different look for this set, rather than just stamping it in colors. As I colored it, it started to look quite organic, rather than geometric. To add to the dimensional look, I added shadows to each shape by first doing a very narrow line with a mid-gray marker, just on the left and bottom edges. When that was done, I went back in with a lighter gray marker and a wider line. This helps to blend out the darker gray and extend the shadow a little bit. Now these pieces look like they're almost floating on that white cardstock. I stamped a sentiment from the same set with black ink, and now this card's done too.
So there they are, lots of different ways to use your solid stamps to get different looks and get more out of this simple craft room basic. What's your favorite? Did I miss one? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up below. I've linked some other videos below that I think you'll enjoy. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.